Welcome to the Amazing Network. Today we are live from Chicago, and it's live and all the challenges that come with live. So I would ask you to forgive us if there's a glitch or a blooper somewhere in here that you notice. It is live and unedited because we want you to hear these stories just exactly the way that I hear them. I'm your host, Doug Piper, and this series is part of my own journey to build a living legacy. If this is the first time you've joined us, please know you're among like-minded friends, and I want you to know I so appreciate you being here. Please also know this isn't an informational tease. I've got no books to sell. There are no courses to take. This is just live interviews with real people that are making a difference in this world. They are people on their own journey, typically from marketplace success to building a living legacy. People with inspiring lives that have been successful in maybe what is the most significant contributions that they've had for their entire lives to date. Today, we're talking to Brad Jeffery. And I think this interview is especially interesting because Brad left a very successful family business because he felt the need to serve others. It's especially interesting that he created a sustaining missional business model that provides jobs for people living in just unfathomable poverty, where an additional $6, only $6, makes a huge difference in their lives. And at the same time, he's providing competitive products for U.S. consumption, but with a social consciousness. So when you listen to the interview, please pay particular attention to Brad's emphasis on how critical it is to build a sustainable missional business. So we're going to go right into the interview with Brad. Brad is the founder, president, and CEO of CauseGear. But most important, Brad's a servant, and he'll tell you a little bit more about that during the interview. His company, CauseGear, focuses on providing sustainable life change to victims of unfathomable poverty and injustice. He and his wife live in the Chicago area. So, Brad, welcome to the Amazing Network today. And while I can't wait to hear more about CauseGear, I want to first hear about what was life like before, and what gave you the confidence to leave that life and jump into CauseGear.
Well, Doug, it's a great question. It's great to be here today. Yeah, life before was really good in the sense of I had a great job that was providing well, and I was able to achieve, what most people would consider to be success. So from that standpoint, things were good. What was missing, though, for me was this. There was just hunger inside me to do more than just create a great paycheck or to accomplish, business success. I really wanted to live out my faith more in my day-to-day work. I had this discontent between my work life, my business environment, and then I would call after work, okay, outside of work. I found myself daydreaming during the day of what was going on, hopefully this weekend or that night with a men's small group or a short-term mission trip coming up or some kind of outreach activity. And I was more excited about that stuff than my day job. So there was this disconnect. I didn't like that.
So, we've talked about unfathomable poverty and injustice. And, the word unfathomable sort of begs a description. Can you talk about that a little bit more?
Sure. Growing up in the Chicago area, my impression or understanding of poverty was people that were homeless, maybe in the inner city or somewhere in the state, and they needed certain things. They needed food, shelter, comfort, and things like that. When I traveled to Mexico originally, and then eventually to Ethiopia, Kenya, and India, I saw a different kind of poverty. people that are in poverty in what we call the majority world countries outside the United States, they are so impoverished. They're on the verge of dying. They're so weak. They're so thin. They're so malnourished. They can barely function. They're missing basic things like protein and some level of fat in their diet, or just access to clean water. In Chicago, if you're homeless, there's a shelter available. There's clean water. There's free clean water. There's a public drinking fountain. There's places you can go to get help in the city. If you're in India or Ethiopia or Kenya, those things do not exist. There's 2.8 billion people that are in destitute poverty in this world right now. And for those people, okay, they're dying or just barely surviving each day, and they have basic needs that are not being provided by those local communities like you would see maybe in the United States.
Wow. So you're describing, I mean, they don't know that they're going to live that week, and maybe the poverty we see is, not anywhere approaching that.
Right.
Wow. So you saw this kind of poverty that obviously just really went straight to your heart. And how did you come up with the idea of CauseGear being a solution to that? That's a pretty disparate cause and effect.
Yeah. Well, I had been studying some trends that I saw nationally and locally, trends around what was working, what was not working as far as attacking poverty. Some of the things that I learned about were microfinance and fair trade. Microfinance, for those that don't know about it, is basically a small loan, maybe $50 to $200 loan to start a small business to help people in certain countries. The more I learned about that, I saw success in that if people could start their own business, create some kind of job, that was a promising and proven way of helping people get out of poverty. I also was noticing the trend of particularly Americans that I was around, how they were tying purchase to cause. There were brands that were coming on the scene about 6 years ago pretty powerfully, where if you bought this item tied to fashion, it would help somebody. There was what I would call the buy one, give one model. Buy this, and then someone will receive something. So buy a pair of shoes, someone will get a pair of shoes. Buy a backpack, someone will get a backpack. And what that proved to me was that people were passionate about cause tied to fashion.
Sure.
What concerned me was if someone is in destitute poverty, let's say in India or Africa, and they get a pair of shoes or they get a backpack, how is that going to change them short-term and long-term? How's that going to change their plight? If they have a brand new pair of shoes and they're dying because of lack of nutrition, the shoes aren't going to take care of that unless they sell the shoes for food, which I found out was happening. Okay. So what it pointed to was the need for good jobs. So I found myself with all this swirling around in my head of the work I'd been doing as far as research. And then when I was in Kenya, and I was in a particular area of Nairobi called Kibera. Kibera is the largest slum in all of Kenya. And if you can picture this, it's a place where about 500,000 people are trying to survive in the equivalent of 1 square mile with no real utilities.
Okay, it sounds like a football stadium.
Yeah. Yeah, if you could, yeah.
I mean,
not much, yeah, it's pretty big. It's not that much.
Elbow to elbow.
Yeah. And you remember no utilities and 500,000 people. You can imagine the human waste that's generated, the cleanliness issues, no access to clean water is very difficult. So people are fighting disease, There's all kinds of corruption going on. It's survival of the fittest, basically. And while I was there, I met a group of women who were AIDS positive, and they were trying to make enough money to pay for their AIDS meds. And they told me that if they could just make, you know, $4 a day, roughly, they could get by. I also knew that the definition of global poverty was people trying to live on $2 a day or less. So I was like, that's interesting. A couple more dollars would get them in a little bit better position.
Sure.
Though they really needed more to have a more of a sustainable life change. But what was interesting is they were making jewelry, and they had great skill, and they were hardworking. They asked me if I would buy their jewelry and sell it to my friends, or take it back with me to the States. And I thought, sure, I can do that. But really, what women in this situation really need is they need to be making a product that has a market, and they need an advocate for the product that they're making. So the thought came to me while I'm in Kibera: what if women like this were making a product that met the quality and design standards of the American consumer?
Yep.
And what if the American consumer knew the name and the story of the person who made this item? And what if they could make maybe $8 a day, not 2 or 4? What would that mean? And so the more questions I asked and the more I thought about this, it became clear to me that this could be a business model. I hadn't done the numbers yet to vet it out, but that was kind of the beginning stage.
So, and the other thing is, versus just buying that jewelry one time while you're there as a
Right.
visitor, you're setting up repeat orders so these women can see a consistent income.
Right. Yeah, and another big differentiator was that they were designing the jewelry and wanting me to sell stuff that they happened to make.
Right.
I also was thinking that one of the issues that I think with fair trade, for example, which has been around a long time, fair trade is the idea behind fair trade, of course, is to provide a fair wage for people that are making the items that you buy, which is what I agree with in terms of business concept. The challenge, though, is most fair trade product is local indigenous design, say African or Indian, pushed on the American consumer. Basically designed in India with the hopes of an American wanting an Indian product or an African product. When in fact, when you look at major retailers, major fashion companies, they decide as a company what the market will buy and what designs are trending. Then they go to those countries that make the product and they train them to meet their design standards. So I thought about what was missing in the fair trade model, and that was a big part of it. The other big part of it is fair trade products, for example, are priced typically a little higher than the general products they're trying to compete with in the marketplace. And I think that impedes their penetration also. So all that stuff's going on in my head while I'm in the Kibera slum and thinking about what if,
So you're beginning to see the flaws with their approach. You're seeing the flaws with other models to provide jobs. How did you pull together, gear? I guess backpacks is what I've understood. Backpacks being one of the solutions.
Right. So a couple of things that I thought about was whatever this product is, we need a low cost of operation. We need to think of what's the smallest amount of capital required to get people going. You're looking at from a business perspective, ideally you want the lowest amount of capital expenditure. You want a short learning curve. You want to be able to train people who have varying skills to be able to actually pull this off. So I thought of products that were fairly easy to make, that required very little capital. So I settled on the idea that it needed to be a sewn product that required a sewing machine and a few other items. So basically a capital investment of about $500,
Yeah.
okay, to get started. And then I thought about, well, what would the product be? What's the sewn product? And then I thought of, well, what's a consumable that we all tend to buy a lot of? Also, what's a product that's visual that would provide an opportunity for conversations? So I looked around my own inventory of gear, and I realized that I had about 5 or 6 backpacks, 3 or 4 messenger bags. I learned at that time, and I started to think about all the bags that particularly women have. Women love buying bags. If you go into any major department store, there are bag departments, okay? And I realized that I was probably not unique, and that many people love to have different kinds of bags. And so the backpack was kind of the first product idea. That in a messenger bag. Then we evolved into women's purses and different things, and now we're actually into apparel. But that was kind of the idea.
So you've narrowed it down to the people that you have a mission to. You've identified the kind of product that you think fits the model. But what makes it sustainable?
Right. Well, for a business to be sustainable, you need, of course, you need to look at all the attributes of how business has been sustainable historically. And when you study business, you need to have a viable product. You have to have a viable market. You have to have a stable, large market. You need to think about what is your differentiator compared to your competitors. What's your value proposition, right?
Sure.
You need to look at your operating cost, your overhead, your conversion cost, accounting conversion cost, your gross margin, and all that, right? So when I first started investigating this, I did an inventory of all those costs, and I realized that, you know what? We could create a product, pay people a wage that would allow them to make about $8 a day and still deliver a competitive product on price, quality, and design to the marketplace. So for me, that meant that this had potential of being sustainable because it was competitive in the marketplace and all the key attributes of what makes a business competitive. And then it had a sustainable impact on the lives we're trying to help, which is the ultimate goal. The vision of our business is not to make the best, coolest product, okay? The vision is to transform the lives of 1 million people from unfathomable poverty and injustice. So that's the end game goal, is to create jobs for actually 250,000 people, because
Wow.
250,000 provide for 3, and you come up with 1 million. But the point is, so there's 2 parts of that when you say sustainable. There's cause-based products out there that tout that they're sustainable business models, and it depends on how you answer that question. Sustainable in terms of the business, or sustainable in terms of the impact you want to make? Now, for us, it's got to be both. It's got to be a sustainable business model, because that's the vehicle to provide the life-changing jobs.
Sure.
Right? If we want to have a sustainable way to get people out of poverty so they don't go back. All right. So there's that part of the sustainability too, not just the sustainability of, can we make money and sell a lot of stuff.
Well, I mean, I guess the most amazing part of your story is how you've pulled together from, just basically the germ of an idea that you had to make a difference, to go all the way to India, pull together fashion, which I think is quite a bit different from your manufacturing background, isn't it?
That's right. Very different.
So you've taken a whole different change in your life from what it was just a few years ago. This series is all about people who are making those significant life changes. So Brad, what would you recommend for those in the audience that they haven't figured out their CauseGear yet? They don't know that it's India or right next door. How do you suggest they go through that process and identify their own CauseGear?
Yeah, yeah. Well, I think if first off, if they're believers in Christ and they put Christ at the center of their lives, they first need to go to the Lord with prayer and ask the Lord to help them, guide them as to how best to be a servant and live out their faith. And I think the next thing to do is to start taking an inventory of your strengths, your gifts, and what gives you energy. There's some great resources. I'll name one right now around understanding your strengths. There's one author called Marcus Buckingham, and he wrote a book called Go Put Your Strengths to Work. And he has this really simple guide on how to determine what your strengths are and how you apply them in the workplace. And that book was huge in terms of helping me kind of take inventory of what were my strengths. And when you think about strength, and I mentioned the word energy, it's really important to think about not just something you're good at, but something that gives you energy. And the way you know if it gives you energy is if you lose track of time when you're doing whatever that thing is. All of a sudden you realize you missed lunch. If you miss lunch and don't know it, that's a strength, okay? And you daydream about that thing, whatever it is, or it keeps you up at night or wakes you up early in the morning. That's a strength. That's a passion. So I would encourage people to know your strengths, know the things that give you energy, and then think about how you could build maybe a business or a mission or an activity around that as that is the foundation.
So you've gone from this smoldering discontent, I think as Jeff Spatafora likes to call it, to creating a company with a sustainable mission business model.
Right.
You know, are they, how would you wrap this up so people can kind of get their arms around? Some people might think, "Wow, India is a long ways away. I've got people next door that really are more my thing." How would you wrap all this up?
Well, I think again, you once you determine the thing that you really are passionate about, it could be anything. You could be an electrician, you could be an athlete, you could be a dancer, you could be a photographer. Once you've determined that the thing that you love to do, try to figure out maybe a way that it can be connected to a servant cause. So, I mean, I'm just brainstorming here, but let's say that you're an electrician, and you have a heart for local people in need. Well, maybe you could do some kind of skill-based training for people that are in poverty to learn the skill of being an electrician. Maybe you can create an apprenticeship for people that don't have that opportunity. Maybe don't have the money to go to a technical school or get the training they need, but you have a heart for that and you want to help them. I mean, we can transfer our gifts to others, whatever that is, and provide a value to those people. Or maybe we create a product or a service that helps people locally.
Wow. Well, I think you really are living the best example of maybe the second half being the most important part of your entire life. I heard numbers of what you said, 250,000 to more than that is what CauseGear hopes to serve.
Yeah, it's a pretty audacious goal, but that's what it's supposed to be.
Well, that's awesome.
Yeah.
Can you, for those that are interested now in CauseGear, how can they find out more about CauseGear, the kinds of things that you have available, or maybe even read about how the people that the ministry serves?
Sure. Our website is very comprehensive. It's meant to be a resource for a variety of things. One, it's a retail store, but also it's a place where people can get engaged. There's a tab on the website called Engage, and under that tab, that section of the site, there's a variety of ways people can get engaged through volunteering or advocating for our cause. There's a tab called Learn, where you can go and learn about global issues around poverty and injustice. There's videos, there's articles, there's all kinds of resources. So there's a variety of ways, depending on what moves you, where you can get involved. I also like to encourage people to think about how they are consuming, not just personally, but maybe the organizations or businesses that they work for. A lot of companies host events or conferences, or they put their brand on different things. This is an excellent way for businesses and organizations to partner for justice, where we would provide, say, a tote bag or some kind of or a computer case for a conference or a journal, and we put the branding and the cause on that item. It does two things. It serves a particular need for a particular event, but more importantly, it aligns that cause of that organization or that business with the solution to helping people come out of poverty or injustice. So that's one example. But yeah, just visiting the site, I think you'll find some interesting things there.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well, I really appreciate you sharing the story. It is, I know, inspiring to me to hear what was at once just a concept is now potentially or eventually going to change the lives of 250,000 people. That is not only hard to appreciate what that kind of poverty is, but that number of people being affected. So it's great what you're doing. So thank you for taking time, Brad, to talk to us today on the Amazing Network. You got a great story. We'll post all the links on the website, and we just appreciate your time. Have a great day. Thank you again, Brad.
Yeah, thank you, Doug. Pleasure to be with you today.
All right, bye.
Bye.